getting to the goal of loving Krishna. There are different kinds of fears that exist in the material world. There's something called as tantrophobia. Anybody know what tantrophobia means? It's a fear of death. There's something called as claustrophobia. Most of us have heard claustrophobia. It's the fear of being in a crowded space or in a closed compartment, right? Hydrophobia?
Water.
Fear of water. Aerophobia?
Fear of air.
Fear of air or fear of heights. As somebody climbs up the stairs and is really up at the rooftop, for example, that's aerophobia. And we know what is pantophobia? Fear of everything. Fear of everything. That's pantophobia. And I hope you all don't have this next fear I'm going to talk about. It's called pilalophobia. Pilalophobia. It's a fear of bald people. I hope none of you have that fear. When we look at what fear is, this is a quote I heard, I thought it was a great quote, that fear is essentially a dark room where negatives develop. And that dark room is essentially the unknown. And when we have that unknown, we don't know what to do, what to expect, what's ahead of us, and that's one of the causes of those negatives being developed, which in this case is fear. Most of the fears in life, they have no basis. They don't have any basis. It's all in the mind, it's imaginary. We generally worry about things that never happened. Fear, by itself, if I analyze the acronym F-E-A-R, anybody know what that stands for? False evidence appears real. F-E-A-R. There was a research conducted by a number of self-help experts who analyzed the different search phrases and search words that people enter in Google and Yahoo and Bing and other such popular search engines. And they go into a complete analytics of what those search words and phrases are. And based on those, they have come up with some data, which I thought I'd share with you because it was very interesting and very pertinent to our topic of what we're talking about today. Based on that data, 65% of the fears or the worries that people have, it never happens in their life. 65%. It never happens. 12% of the fear or the worry, it's from the past events. It's already occurred. It's gone. It's a past event. 13% comes from the people who we cannot change. 6% of the fear is caused by events that are beyond our control. Anybody doing the math in their heads? How much percent is left? 4%. Thank you. Listening attentively. 4% is left. The 4% of that fear or worry or anxiety or stress actually have some basis. But we end up spending our lives on that other 96%, so much time that we have no time left for this 4%. Interesting, isn't it? In that same research, they identified what are the top 3 fears in this world. Top 3 fears. Fear number 3, death. Very good. That's fear number 3. Fear number 2, public speaking. Very good. And fear number 1, flying. Flying. The fear of flying. Although it's very interesting, statistically speaking, the mode of transportation by air is the safest. There are more accidents on the road by car or motorcycles or rail accidents or ship accidents than air accidents. So statistically speaking, even though it is the #1 fear in the world, it happens to be the safest mode of transportation. I've done a few stress management seminars in corporate America, corporate world, guided meditations in the corporate world. And I see that a lot of people are working under stress. A lot of stress. For a variety of reasons. Some people externally may appear like they're all very cool and calm and composed and not stressed at all. While on the inside, they are actually stressed and worried and afraid. It's just like a duck swimming. When we look at a duck on water, the part of the duck above the surface of the water is very cool and calm, and it's just going, having a great time. But if you look at the duck under the surface of the water, the duck is paddling intensely just to make sure that it can go around. Similarly, there are some people on the surface, they may appear to be calm, but there's a number of things that are worrying them, and there's quite a bit of stress and anxiety and fear within them. And this is seen as we go across not only in corporate America, but in so many different aspects of where people work, what they do, their regular activities, and so on. Otherwise, how would it be possible to explain what Robin Williams was going through? Just a few months ago, the news came out that apparently he committed suicide. Now, Robin Williams quickly rose to stardom. Very, very famous comedian. His acts were making people laugh and have a good time. But at the same time, inside, he was suffering. He was miserable, unhappy, discontent, and so many other difficult and struggling emotions that apparently it led to his apparent suicide.
He had depression and
As well. I mean, this is a very sobering reality. But we need to not ignore it. We just need to make sure that we are recognizing it and checking it. This world is actually made like that. That we'll always be fearful of something that we don't have. That's how this world is made. There's a poem that I can remember in this regard, and that poem is, "As a rule, man is a fool. When it's hot, he wants it cool. When it's cool, he wants it hot. Always wanting that which is not." And so when I look at this, the fear essentially comes from the mind. It's this wretched mind that gives rise to a number of different things, including prejudices, revenges, fantasies, anxieties, and so on. If there's something that I don't have, I'll be in anxiety of getting it. And once I have acquired that, then I'll be fearful of losing it. So either way, mind's always occupied in a stressful condition. For example, money. When people don't have money, they're in anxiety of how I can acquire and earn more money. Once you get money, then people are fearful of I shouldn't be losing it. We'll talk more about money and the money-related examples in a few minutes from now. I just wanted to give you an example of when we talk about fearfulness and how it's in the mind. There's a story of a man sitting under a tree, nice breeze, closed eyes, very relaxed, and he felt as if something bit him on his feet. By the time he opened his eyes and looked down as to what bit him on his feet, he saw a rat go by. And he thought, oh, it's just a rat that bit me. Whereas in reality, a snake had bitten him. He didn't see the snake though. The snake bit him and went by, and by the time he opened up his eyes and looked down, there was a rat. And he looked at the rat and said, oh, it's just a rat. It's okay. A few days go by. Same tree, nice breeze, lying down, closed eyes, relaxing. Now this time the rat bit him. And by the time he opened his eyes and looked down to see what bit him, the snake was going by. The snake didn't bite him. It was just going by. But the man looked at the snake and panicked and died. Now what actually killed him?
Fear.
Exactly. There's another true story I want to cite in this regard. One of our great saints in our tradition from Germany, His Holiness Sachinandan Swami Maharaj. His father's friend, this is a true story. His father's friend was an expert engineer working in the rail company. His job was to oversee the deep freeze coach of the train that carried all the vegetables and produce. And it was a very deep freeze, so obviously the temperatures were very, very low in that coach. One day while he was working, inside the coach just somehow got locked. He got locked inside and he couldn't get out. He really was trying to bang the door and get somebody's attention, but there was nobody out there to answer. And being the expert engineer that he was, he knew that in this temperature, a man cannot survive for more than 7 hours. In 7 hours, man dies in that temperature. Sure enough, 7 hours go by, and he died. And the next morning, which was just a few hours later, the officials come by, and they open up this deep freeze, and they were shocked to see this body completely blue. They were really shocked. You know why they were shocked? Because there was no electricity in that whole area for the last 12 hours. So there was no question of that coach having that temperature. And there was no question of having been closed in that environment, exposed to such low temperatures. So again, what killed him? Is that fear in the mind. Now, these are some graphic examples, and our lives are not like that. You know, our lives may have some smaller fears, but these small fears may quickly add up, and if we don't keep them in check and don't address them, then they become real problems. So we just want to be very cognizant of these fears and address them. As they call it, nip it in the bud. So that was just a little bit around an introduction of what is fear. Let's talk about why fear exists. In my opinion, there are 3 reasons of why fear exists. The first is because of bodily consciousness. We identify ourselves with the body, whereas we are the spirit soul. People think that this body can protect us, whereas in reality, they get into shock when they realize that the body cannot really protect us. Why? Because the body ages, the body gets weak, and as it gets weaker and weaker, it loses its immunity power, its capability to protect us. We are on one hand brainwashed, so to speak, by the media to take care of our body and the bodily relationships. Whether it is related to food, the kinds of foods we like to enjoy, the clothing that we like to wear, the relationships that we like to have, it's all on the bodily consciousness. And what happens is we lose focus of that spirit soul, and therefore all the things around the world become to harm us. There was one elevator company, I'll give you a very nice example here. There was an elevator company, and they received complaints that the elevator is slow. Many of you may have experienced that, especially in parking garages, where you go into the parking garage and you want to go from level 1 to level 2, and that elevator is so slow. It takes forever just to get to the next level. So they called in, they complained, your elevator is too slow. The elevator company, smart people, instead of fixing the elevator, you know what they did? They installed mirrors on the inside of the elevator. Now when people got inside the elevators, they were looking at the most beautiful person or the handsome person in the world, and they could take all their time doing that. Complaints stopped coming. It was no longer slow. So we are in this, sometimes people find themselves in this bodily consciousness, they are on that platform. People need to be on the spirit soul platform, identifying themselves as who they are, the real identity of being the spirit soul. Because once you start identifying that you are the soul, that will change everything. From the decisions that we make, to the activities that we carry out, everything. Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, sitting on my left, what a beautiful genius he was. He taught us that there are these 4 things that animals do: eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. If you look at animals' activities, they are pretty much doing one of these 4 things. Humans, on the other side, when they try to engage themselves into these activities, they find themselves miserable. You know why? Because humans have a distinctive element that the animals do not necessarily have, and that is called the intelligence. And using that intelligence, humans are meant to inquire. Inquire about, who am I? Who is God? What's my relationship with God? What is this world? What am I doing here? What's the ultimate goal of life? And on and on. It's to utilize that intelligence and to make sure that we ask those kinds of questions so that we can then eventually tap upon our spiritual potential, and then we'll be happy. So that's the first reason of why fear exists, is because of the bodily consciousness. The second reason why fear exists is the gap between expectation and reality. Now here's reality, and here's expectation, and there's a gap. And that gap is called stress, and that stress leads to fear. Now in this reality and expectation equation, reality is constant. It is what it is. It's not going to change. Whatever I may want to do, the reality is reality. It's not going to change. However, the expectation can be changed. The expectation can be changed. And we need to learn how to change those expectations. Because when the expectation is here and the reality is here, there's that obvious gap that gets us into that miserable condition. If we change the expectation and align it with the reality, now there's no gap. Has anybody heard of Rajat Gupta? Rajat Gupta. You have heard of it? One. Good. Rajat Gupta was the head of McKinsey. Huge, huge, huge company. Financial wizard. A billionaire. He used to have dinner with the president and so many other high-ranking government officials. He used to be in the board of directors. He was consulting with a number of different companies like Procter & Gamble, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. He's a very, very high-profile person. Do you know where he is right now? He's in jail. He's in jail. The federal court found him guilty of insider trading. And when the judges were writing the sentence, they were in shock and disbelief that a person of that level can fall victim to greed and anxiety of getting more money. Because what he had wasn't enough. Money, sometimes we say, is sweeter than honey. And we know that it is difficult to be happy with little money. And we get more money, that's when it is impossible to be happy. Because money cannot give us happiness. People know this. But their expectations are always higher than what they have. If you want to know how rich you are, count the number of things you have that money cannot buy. You might be able to get the best of beds and the furniture from the market, but you cannot buy sleep. You can buy the best of restaurants and the best of chefs in the world, but you cannot buy hunger. If you would like to know how rich you are, drop a tear and see how many hands reach out to wipe that tear. Some people are so poor that all they have is money. And all of this, the result of all of this is that the life leads to full of fear and stress and anxiety. Everybody knows the Boeing company. They make airplanes. The owner of Boeing company has so much more money. And he wanted to enjoy that money and his lifestyle. But he contracted a terrible disease and he could only now live on barley water. Rich people, they are in fear of having an heir so they can pass on their wealth too. We all know about Rockefeller. His young son died and he became so miserable because his young son died at a very young age. For one who is respectable and honored, they are fearful of losing their honor. Because when one gets dishonored, they feel like committing suicide. They just can't live. Beauty is another example. When it starts fading away, people can't really face that. Because again, it's the difference between expectation and reality. There was a beautiful French actress. Very, very beautiful. The day she saw herself in the mirror, developing a wrinkle, a gray hair, she was so much distressed that she didn't leave her house for 30 years because of the shock of aging. So fear is caused because of this high and unrealistic expectation. The reality, on the other hand, is different. So that's the second reason. The third reason is The power of time. Time invades our lives. It's imperceptible and it passes by very quickly. It's a great force that one can't see. And we all experience this. Our nails grow, right? We know they grow. Our hair grows. We can't see it, but it's growing. A young child and an old man were looking at the clock. The same clock. They both were looking at it. And the young child's thinking, why is the clock going so slow? When am I going to be able to grow up and enjoy life and party and get my own car? When I'm going to be 21? That's the magical age. The old man, on the other hand, is looking at the same clock and thinking, why is it going so fast? Why doesn't it slow down? The clock is the same. The time is the same. The pace of time is the same. But the perceptions are different. There are two great, well-known, world-renowned personalities. One is Muhammad Ali. Everybody heard of Muhammad Ali, right?
Right.
Olympic medal, gold medal in 1960. In 1996, he was the one carrying the Olympic torch. He was the last one carrying the Olympic torch to finally ignite that flame. For those of you who watched the opening ceremony of 1996 Olympic Games, it was in Atlanta, his hand was shaking so much because he had acquired Parkinson's disease that the organizers were worried whether or not he'd be able to light up the flame. Finally, he was able to light up the flame. And then he made a public statement. He said, I'm a great fool because I thought that I could remain in the best of my condition forever, only to realize that the power of time shows something else. Another very well-known, world-renowned personality, Margaret Thatcher. Everybody heard of Margaret Thatcher? Yes. The first female Prime Minister of England. She was known as the Iron Lady. She died in April last year. When she was old, she was so fearful because she lost her husband. She was in constant anxiety of just aging and so on. And she was so much in fear and stress. People couldn't believe that this is the same lady who shook the world when she was the Prime Minister. And she was dealing with this. So that's the power of time, the third reason. So we are talking about how to develop fearlessness as a divine quality that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. We talked about an introduction of fear, what fear is. We looked at the different kinds of fear. We looked at what is the cause of fear. And there were three causes we explored of fear. What are the three causes? Raise your hand and speak, please. Yes, yes. Expectation, the gap between expectation and reality. The second, power of time. And the first reason was?
Bodily consciousness.
Bodily consciousness. You took notes, huh? Mark. The bodily consciousness. So those are the three reasons we talked about. We explored of why does fear exist. Let's talk about how we can cope up with that fear. In our tradition, we have two powerful techniques of handling. The first technique is hearing about Lord Krishna. Now we all have some centers or some anchors that we focus on, that our lives revolve around. And let me take the example of money again. Some people root themselves in money, thinking that will protect them, and they will be completely fearless. And when they see that the money is lost in a stock market crash or by making some bad decisions, they are shaken. Their lives are shaken. Because they couldn't believe that the very thing which is the center of their lives could be shaken. This center, sometimes it's money, sometimes it might be relationships, but the point here is that this center is very fragile and it's temporary. And when that fragile and temporary center or the anchor is lost, the result will be misery. So then the question is, how can I then find a center which is not fragile, which is not temporary, something that is permanent, something that is eternal? And we find that Krishna is an eternal principle. When we hear and chant the holy names of Krishna, then we are connected to that eternal center. Even when the whole world is shaken, a devotee is not shaken because he is connected to that unshakable eternal principle. Therefore, we need to make God the center of our life. Now, I, from my professional background, have had exposure to a number of different management research and books. There's this management guru, Stephen Covey, and his wife Rebecca. Everybody heard of that? He came up with a popular book, The 7 Habits of Effective People. One of his books on time management, he talks about the power of conscience that we all have. It's the power of conscience that tells us the right from the wrong. This power, this conscience, can be very active. This is what he says in his book, that this conscience can be very active and powerful when we hear submissively from the scriptures. Now, these guys are not Hare Krishna ISKCON devotees. These are management gurus. They are training the whole world on a number of different management topics. And they mention this hearing submissively from the scripture. And if you look in the back, what does that mean? Scripture really meant? Because sometimes it might mean different things to different people. They're actually listing down a number of scriptures that includes the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita. So hearing about Krishna. When we hear, our hearts get connected to that eternal center. And when we are sincere in our hearing, the Lord sitting in our hearts changes our hearts. That's how powerful hearing is. So that's the first technique. The second technique is chanting the holy names of God. The holy names of God on your top right hand side, you face the altar, 3 words. Hare, Krishna, and Rama. And the Maha Mantra. The entire Maha Mantra. When we chant, it immediately takes us onto a higher level. We feel positive nourishment. We feel relief. Just as the rain, when it falls down, it washes away the dirt of the streets. Chanting the holy name cleanses our heart. This chanting process, it fills our heart with so much confidence, so much of fearlessness that we are able to address the challenges of our lives that we talked about earlier. We'll find people who chant not only for themselves but also for others. It is indeed one of the most practical yogas that can be performed. When we chant regularly, we come under the comfortable embrace of the holy name of the Lord. The holy name of the Lord is not different from the Lord. If we chant the holy name even once, with great feeling and sincerity, all the fear vanishes. Just like a child is completely fearless under the embrace of the parent, one who is chanting Hare Krishna feels this comfortable embrace of the Lord. That's how powerful chanting is. So we have explored these 2 techniques, hearing and chanting. And so now the question may arise, well, this is great. Are there any examples? Has this worked with anybody? The answer is an emphatic yes. Not only has this worked in the past, but this continues to work and will continue to work. The first and foremost example that I can think about is His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of ISKCON. In 1973, Srila Prabhupada was giving a program in Calcutta, and the program was being attended by a number of people, hundreds and thousands of people, and there were some terrorists at the time, Naxalite terrorists, who attacked and caused a lot of commotion and chaos. Prabhupada was completely fearless, undisturbed. As the chaos was going on, the terrorists were attacking, they were throwing chairs. Prabhupada sat on the dais, behind the mic, and in a very, in a loud voice, in a very stern voice, in a very firm way, he started chanting the Brahma Samhita prayers. And as soon as he started chanting the Brahma Samhita prayers, the commotion died down. The terrorists stopped attacking. They actually came down on the first row. They sat down to listen to what Srila Prabhupada had to say. That's how fearless and undisturbed Srila Prabhupada was, because he was rooted in Krishna. His anchor is Krishna. On another occasion, Srila Prabhupada was flying from Dallas to New Orleans in 1975. And the flight en route had a massive turbulence, a huge turbulence. The wings opened up, the masts, they fell down, everybody was in panic. There was a lot of commotion. Everybody was very, very afraid. Everybody was thinking the plane's going to crash. There was a Upendra Prabhu sitting next to Srila Prabhupada. He was traveling with him. And he just said, oh my goodness, this plane is going to crash. There's so much of heavy turbulence. And Prabhupada, knowing what's going on, there's not much anything can do when there's turbulence other than to sit and fasten your seatbelt. But he was sitting very firmly with his chanting beads in his hand, and he was chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And he was just firmly chanting, completely undisturbed, completely fearless. After some time, the plane stabilized, it landed very safely, and when it landed, Upendra Prabhu was thinking that maybe Srila Prabhupada will tell him something. But Prabhupada didn't say anything at the time. When they came out to the airport, Prabhupada looked at him, and Upendra Prabhu thought maybe now Prabhupada will say something. It was such a, almost an accident that almost was about to happen, but we were saved. So maybe he'll say something about that, and something that will give us some incitement into this, something that will give us some strength. Prabhupada looked at him and says, so how far is the temple from here? And so that's how undisturbed Prabhupada was. He was so firm. He was completely unaffected. There's another example. Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his picture on my left. He preached convincingly against casteism and the philosophical deviations of the Vaishnava philosophy. He was given the title of a lion guru because he preached so convincingly against voidism and impersonalism. And he was so rooted in Krishna that allowed him that faith, that firm conviction, where he'd be able to say things that he has to say, which are directly from the scriptures, that some of the other renunciates, they wouldn't even dare to challenge him with. Another one of our great saints, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. There was, during his time, a yogi who was like a duplicious and a fake yogi. Yet he was powerful enough in that he could inflict hurt and pain onto other people. Bhakti Vinod Thakur went out there, challenged him defeated him, exposed him, and completely brought him down. Why? Because Srila Bhaktivinoda Tagore was firmly chanting the holy name, and he came out victorious, and he was so deeply rooted in Krishna, he was very, very fixed in his practice. So we look at some examples. I'm not talking about examples of thousands of years ago. These are in the very near past of our lifetimes. There are many devotees that I personally know in the Hare Krishna movement who are so devoted, so dedicated, so firmly rooted in Krishna consciousness that they are completely fearless. So having talked about what fear is, what's the cause of fear, how to cope with fear, we also looked at some examples of some personalities who are completely fearless. The question may arise, are the devotees fearful of anything, or are they just completely fearless? And is there anything called as healthy fear? The answer is yes. When we chant and when we hear and we are on the path of Krishna consciousness, devotees are fearful of the temptations and the distractions on this path of devotional service. We are fearful of criticism and envy. Criticizing other devotees, offending them is very, very dangerous. Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu compares this offense to that of a mad elephant running into a beautifully decorated and maintained garden where we have a number of beautiful flowers, plants, vegetables and so on that are growing. When a mad elephant enters, he completely ruins that garden. So making an offense to other devotees is like that. So we are fearful of that. We don't want to be making this kind of an offense. Our prayer always is, please protect us, please help us so we do not offend other devotees. So my request to all of you, please practice Krishna consciousness, especially the hearing and chanting. It's very powerful, it's very potent, it makes us fearless, it makes us pure, and we'll be able to conduct our daily activities without any stress, worry, or fear, and you'll become completely happy. We are in a very special month. This is the month of Kartik. This is a very special month for making spiritual advancement. During this month, Krishna makes himself easily accessible to us. And to show our sincerity, devotees, they accept different kind of austerities, such as fasting or cutting down on non-essential activities, offering charity. Most devotees in this temple are offering a few extra rounds of the Maha Mantra. If someone is not chanting before the month of Kartik, he requests that you chant at least one round. If whatever number of rounds you are chanting before the month of Kartik, that's like a baseline. And we request you to chant a little bit extra. And show that sincerity so that Krishna becomes easily approachable. In this month, Krishna displays his beautiful pastimes. Now, while we know of Krishna as a supreme controller and the supreme lord, just as there is a supreme court judge whose activities in the court may be different, but that same person who is the supreme court judge, his activities at home will be different. Similarly, Krishna displays some of his pastimes that are beyond the supreme controller aspect of God. We actually get to know the Lord very intimately. The first line of the prayer that we offer to the Lord is Namami Shwaram Satchid Ananda Rupam. Namami means I am offering my humble obeisances, my respects to you. To whom? Ishwar. Ishwar means the controller, the supreme controller. And then it goes on to say Satchid Ananda Rupam. This controller, Rupam means a form. This supreme controller, this God, is not formless. This God has a form, a root. And what is that form made of? Sat, Chit and Anand. Sat is eternity. Chit is knowledge. And Anand is bliss. So this form of Lord Shri Krishna is composed of eternity, knowledge and bliss. You will see in about 20, maybe 25 minutes from now, everybody will have an opportunity to offer a candle to the Lord. And that's done to show our gratitude and a humble prayer from us to help cleanse our hearts and awaken the dormant love of God in our hearts. Thank you very much. We have 5 minutes. We can perhaps take a couple of questions. Anybody has a question or a comment or any realizations that you may have to share? I see a hand all the way in the corner. Shovan Prabhu.
Prabhu, you said because of, you explained some of the causes for the fear. One of the causes I have trouble. Recently one of the reasons for me to come into Krishna consciousness is become fearless. I used to be under severe fear of so many circumstances and so many things in life. But there is one thing that is recently troubling me, that is envy. So, how do I overcome this envy? Envy is eating me inside. This envy is directly, towards a devotee. And I don't want to face that devotee. So it's troubling me a lot, but I have to face that devotee. So the fear is really, intense. And, as you said, the holy name will, give the protection. But still there is a fear that, that I will not be completely out of the fear.
Thank you, Shovan Prabhu. Did everybody hear the question? Yes, Prabhu.
I just want to second what he said. He's been suffering from this recently, but I've been suffering from this for as long as I can remember. And specifically, just to put a face on the envy, when I see someone who's better than me, they're a better speaker than I am, or they're more learned than I am, more pure-hearted than I am, they're a better musician than I am, so many things. I wish ill on them, and I want to be better than them. And I feel some pain in my heart, really plaguing me for a long time now. So I'm not sure what his envy looks like, but that's what mine looks like. So I'm wondering, alongside him, maybe even have a worse case than he does, what I can do about it.
Thank you, Prabhu. Tukaram Prabhu, for sharing. Thank you, Shovan Prabhu. Everybody heard the question?
Yes.
We are dealing with envy. Anybody else deal with the same problem? I know I do. Raise your hand. So, we talked about when we have challenges in our life, we are not really sure how to deal with them, and then we turn to the scriptures, we turn to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, we turn to our teachers of getting to obtain some guidance, some direction as to how to deal with that, how to conduct ourselves. A couple of things I'd like to mention. We talked about hearing and chanting. Hearing and chanting with a sincere prayer, firmly fixed. That chanting will slowly start to cleanse the heart and will eventually clean the heart to a point where it's a complete transparent medium where we'll be able to see through and through. Chanting the holy name is so powerful that it will eventually allow us to get rid of all these negative elements that have built up in our heart for a number of lifetimes, what to speak of a number of years. Another thing, if I may say, that the love of God, the bhakti that we receive is received from another devotee. It's a devotee that gives us that bhakti. When we have this kind of a feeling towards someone else, what I would do, I would approach that devotee. And I would open up my heart. And I would say, please allow me to open up my heart. I have this feeling of envy that you may be better at something than I am. Please help me overcome this. And 9 times out of 10 you will see that the devotee comes back to you and says, oh no, Prabhu, it is me. Please pardon my offense. I am not better, higher, senior. I'm actually taking a junior position. I'm lower. I'm so lower of the lowest. And when we have that dialogue with that devotee, the two of them, there's a wonderful harmony that takes place. And in that harmony, we find that not only this one person, not only me in this case, am I able to clear my heart and get rid of some of the feelings that I have had, but on the other hand, we find that this other devotee might also have had some other things that helped clear up that for that other devotee. And so by doing these two processes, by hearing and chanting, and then by actually going out and opening ourselves up, we have this as an example in our tradition. The Goswamis, the picture on your right hand side, if you look at the altar, the 6 Goswamis, they were devotees who have had this kind of an exchange, and they came together. They had a wonderful conversation. These saints have actually taught us. They have led by example, and we learn from their examples. Does that help, Prabhu?
Very much. Thank you so much.
Does that help, Shobhan Prabhu? There's another question here.
No, one last comment. It's been my experience that when you're singing or chanting with that other person, it makes it very hard to keep any animosity, or at least it'll soften that. Because then holy names will melt that away, ideally. But it'll at least soften it.
Thank you for sharing, Prabhu. That is wonderful. The holy name melts away and softens any, what is the word you use, animosity that may exist. This whole feeling of envy is a very, very dangerous thing. The first thing to clearing envy is to acknowledge that that envy exists. And so I'm really thankful and grateful to Tukaram Prabhu and Shobhan Prabhu for bringing this up, because this thing is prevalent, and unless and until we acknowledge and own this problem, we will not be able to solve it. And now that we have identified the problem, we'll be able to take actionable steps to solve this and help ourselves make progress towards the path of devotional service towards Krishna consciousness. Was that Prabhu or?
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you.
Any other? Thank you, Prabhu. Any other comments or questions? There's one question in the back, and there was one here. So we'll take her first. Yes.
I just have a comment about the trying to be as good as the other person. Well, our relationship with God, Krishna, is a personal one. So our level of devotion or what we do is just between us and God, really. So it shouldn't matter if somebody else is better than us at something, because it's really just between us and our relationship with God, right?
If it's between us and our relationship with
Like my relationship, your relationship with God. So it shouldn't matter if somebody else is better than you at the end
In one sense, I may look at that, that's one way of looking at it. But if I look at it only from that angle, then I'm missing out on something. And what I'm missing out on is a very key quality that we all need to have, which is compassion. And Krishna, being the infinite reservoir of compassion, everybody gets that quality in an infinitesimal quantity. And we need to identify and develop that. And when we develop that, we look around and we see that we are compassionate towards every single living being. Because every single living being is a part and parcel of Krishna. When we love Krishna, we love everybody. It's hard not to just love Krishna and not love anybody else. Does that help?
Yeah.
Thank you. Final point, final question?
You are assuming that other person is a devotee, if the person is not a devotee, how do you deal with this issue of envy?
I'll give you a brief answer because of the time, and then we'll get into this in detail. If the other person is not a devotee, but you are a devotee, and so you take that approach that you usually do, being firmly rooted in Krishna, and have the faith in Krishna, and approach it and open your heart. And when you come out of that situation, even though when somebody is not a devotee, everybody is loving and compassionate. And they will see that somebody else is opening up their heart, and that opens up their heart too, that melts away. Sweetness from one end makes the other end also sweet. And in that way, you would then be able to come together in a relationship, in a conversation, and be able to remove any feelings that may exist between the two. And this works even if the other person, thank you for asking, even if the other person is not a devotee. And if you're looking to make spiritual advancement, our teachers say, if you're looking to make spiritual advancement and you'd like to know how advanced you are, see how humble and tolerant you have become. The more humble you are, the more tolerant you are, the more spiritually advancement you're making. We are almost out of time. I thank you all very much for your time and patience.